We're just coming up at the top of the hour. It is 8 p.m. in the East. As if this campaign couldn't get more historic and unprecedented, what law enforcement officials are now investigating as a possible assassination attempt of former President Donald Trump. It was a major campaign event that Donald Trump was hosting.
Just last week, a hair-raising moment unfolded as former President Donald Trump narrowly escaped an assassination attempt while campaigning for the 2024 election.
Really see something that said, take a look at what happened.
But Trump's not the first target in America's tumultuous political landscape. Throughout history, U.S. presidents, former leaders, and even top contenders have found themselves in the crosshairs. Their reasons? Everything from a burning desire to reshape American politics to downright bizarre fixations on celebrities. Intrigued? Let's dive into the gripping tales of these assassination plots, stretching all the way back to 1776. Donald Trump. On July 13, 2024, the calm of a campaign rally in Butler, Pennsylvania, was shattered by gunfire. Amid the chaos, former President Donald J. Trump was on stage, addressing a sea of supporters when a man fired multiple shots toward the platform. The bullets tragically claimed the life of one spectator and critically injured two others. The shooter, identified as 20-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks from Bethel Park, Pennsylvania, was swiftly neutralized by Secret Service snipers. So, how did the shooting unfold? Trump literally dodged a bullet. He came within a hair's breadth of death, escaping by mere millimeters and milliseconds. Several video clips captured the frantic moments as Secret Service agents swarmed around him immediately after the shooting. But now, a slow-motion video reveals just how close the call really was. Trump's simple head tilt saved him from an assassination attempt. The footage shows Trump tilting his head just seconds before the shot rang out. In a dramatic moment, he grabbed his right ear, looked at his hand, and then dropped to his knees behind the podium. Emerging about a minute later, his face was streaked with blood. "Fight! Fight! Fight!" he shouted, pumping his fist in the air, rallying the crowd. In an interview with the Washington Examiner, Trump reflected on the incident, saying he had to be at the exact right angle since the bullet was an eighth of an inch away. That I would turn exactly at that second where he, the gunman, wouldn't stop the shot is pretty amazing. Pretty amazing. I'm really not supposed to be here. Moments later, agents whisked him away, his face and ear bloodied as they rushed him to his motorcade. Later, in a social media post, former President Trump described the terrifying moment. "I knew immediately that something was wrong when I heard a whizzing sound, felt shots, and then the bullet ripping through the skin. Much bleeding took place, so I realized then what was happening." Trump was taken to a hospital for treatment and then flew to New Jersey, where he spent the night at his golf club. The Secret Service later revealed that the shooter had fired from an elevated position outside the rally venue, with analysis suggesting a total of 8 shots were fired. What drove this young man to such a drastic act, and how will this event shape the future of American politics? Thomas Matthew Crooks, just 2 months out of the Community College of Allegheny County, had a quiet job as a dietary aide at a nursing home. But there was another side to him. Crooks was a member of the Clayton Sportsman's Club in Greater Pittsburgh, where he had access to a 200-yard rifle range. This is where the story begins to take a darker turn. When law enforcement officials arrived on the scene, they recovered an AR-15-style semi-automatic rifle from Crooks' body. The FBI revealed that the gun used in the attack was legally bought by Crooks' father, who had lent it to him for what he claimed was a trip to the shooting range. In the 48 hours leading up to the shooting of former President Donald Trump, Crooks made several stops around his suburban Pittsburgh hometown. On Friday, he visited his local shooting range, where he practiced his aim. The following morning, Crooks made a stop at Home Depot to buy a 5-foot ladder and then visited a gun store to purchase 50 rounds of ammunition. Crooks then drove his Hyundai Sonata about an hour north, joining thousands at Trump's rally. He parked his car outside the event, concealing an improvised explosive device in the trunk wired to a transmitter he carried. Investigators believe he used the ladder to climb a nearby building from where he opened fire on the former president. As investigators dive into Crook's background, they find no clear motive or signs of mental health issues. He wasn't linked to any specific ideology. Bethel Park police revealed a bomb investigation at Crook's home, with the area now tightly controlled and accessible only to residents. Officials believe Crooks acted alone, but questions linger about how much planning went into the attack. Did he have help? Why did he do it? The investigation continues. So, who was Thomas Matthew Crooks? The picture that emerges is puzzling and, at times, contradictory. Some who knew him describe a loner, often bullied, who sometimes wore hunting outfits to school. Yet others, like former classmate Summer Barkley, remember him differently. She recalls him as a top student, passionate about history and government, always getting good grades and well-liked by teachers. Amid this tragic event, we also remember Corey Comparatore, the 50-year-old victim. A devoted father of two from Sava, Pennsylvania, Corey worked at a plastic manufacturing company and was a volunteer firefighter. He was killed while heroically shielding his family during the chaos at the rally. This incident echoes past moments in American history, like the shootings of Ronald Reagan and the Kennedys. While many assassination attempts have been thwarted, a few have tragically succeeded, forever altering the nation. Want to uncover more about these historical events? Hit that like button and subscribe to our channel. Ronald Reagan. March 30th, 1981, was a day that could have changed the course of American history. As President Ronald Reagan exited the Washington Hilton Hotel, John Hinckley Jr. aimed his gun and fired 6 shots. Chaos erupted. A bullet ricocheted off the presidential limousine and struck Reagan in the left underarm, breaking a rib, puncturing a lung, and causing severe internal bleeding. Reagan, close to death when he arrived at George Washington University Hospital, was stabilized in the emergency room and underwent emergency surgery. Miraculously, he pulled through and was discharged on April 11th. This brush with death even boosted his approval ratings. The attack didn't just injure Reagan. White House Press Secretary James Brady, Secret Service agent Tim McCarthy, and police officer Thomas Delahanty were also hit. While Reagan and the others recovered, Brady suffered permanent brain damage, leading to his death being ruled a homicide in 2014. Hinckley, then 25, was grappling with acute psychosis. His twisted motive? He believed that shooting Reagan would capture the attention of actress Jodie Foster. In 1982, Hinckley was found not guilty by reason of insanity and sent to a psychiatric hospital for treatment. Fast forward to 2022, Hinckley, now free from psychiatric supervision, has tried to reinvent himself as a painter and folk singer. Despite his efforts to move on, his past still haunts him, leading to the cancellation of several concerts. Reflecting on his infamous act, Hinckley told Connecticut news station WTNH, "I know I'm known for an act of violence, but I'm a completely different person than in 1981. I stand for peace now." Reagan's near-fatal encounter was the last time a sitting president was wounded in an assassination attempt until the July 13th attack on Trump. Gerald Ford. In a bizarre twist of fate, 2 women attempted to assassinate President Gerald Ford within just 17 days of each other, an unusual distinction, as they are the only female assailants ever to target a U.S. president. The first attack came from Lynette "Squeaky" Fromm, a follower of the infamous Charles Manson. On September 5, 1975, Fromm aimed a gun at Ford while he was walking in Sacramento, California. Her plan was thwarted when Secret Service agents quickly subdued her and the gun failed to fire. Fromm's bizarre motivation was to draw attention to the plight of California's redwood trees and to gain Manson's approval, whom she idolized. After serving her sentence, Fromm was released from prison in 2009. Just 17 days later, on September 22nd, another woman, Sarah Jane Moore, took her shot at Ford outside a San Francisco hotel. Moore's intent was to ignite a violent revolution in the U.S. through her act of assassination. However, her shot missed its mark, and a passerby intervened during her second attempt. Moore spent 32 years behind bars, and upon her release at the age of 77, admitted to being blinded by her radical political views. Robert Kennedy. During his campaign for the Democratic Party's presidential nomination, Robert F. Kennedy faced a tragic and shocking end. On June 5, 1968, at the Ambassador Hotel in Los Angeles, Kennedy was shot 3 times by Surin, a Palestinian who was incensed by Kennedy's support for Israel. Kennedy succumbed to his injuries the next day. The chaotic scene saw Surin quickly subdued by onlookers in the ballroom, but not before 5 others were also wounded. Luckily, they all survived. This assassination rocked the 1968 presidential race and compounded the tumultuous atmosphere of the era, coming just 2 months after the murder of civil rights leader Martin Luther King Jr. Sirhan, driven by his anger over Kennedy's pro-Israel stance and his promise of 50 fighter jets to Israel, claimed his act was a political statement. Convicted on April 17, 1969, Sirhan was initially sentenced to death, but his sentence was later commuted to life in prison. John F. Kennedy. The tragic assassination of President John F. Kennedy happened at 12:30 p.m. on Friday, November 22, 1963, in Dallas, Texas. During a presidential motorcade through Dealey Plaza, Kennedy was seated in a convertible with his wife Jacqueline, Texas Governor John Connally, and Connally's wife Nellie. As the car passed the Texas School Book Depository, shots rang out. Allegedly, former U.S. Marine Lee Harvey Oswald fired from the 6th floor, hitting Kennedy once in the back, with the bullet exiting through his throat, and a second fatal shot to the head. Governor Connally was also severely injured, and a bystander, James Tague, was grazed by a bullet fragment. The motorcade sped to Parkland Memorial Hospital, but at 1 p.m., President Kennedy was declared dead. The nation was in shock. Oswald was soon arrested and charged with both Kennedy's assassination and the murder of Dallas policeman J.D. Tippit, who had been shot in a residential area of Oak Cliff just hours after Kennedy's assassination. However, Oswald never faced trial. On November 24th, while being transferred from the city jail to the county jail, nightclub owner Jack Ruby shot and killed Oswald in the basement of the Dallas Police Department headquarters. Ruby was convicted of Oswald's murder, though his conviction was later overturned. Ruby died of cancer in prison in 1967 while awaiting a new trial. The Warren Commission, in its September 1964 report, concluded that Oswald had acted alone in killing both Kennedy and Tippit, and that Ruby had acted alone in killing Oswald. Despite this, public skepticism has endured. From 1966 to 2004, numerous polls have shown that up to 80% of Americans suspect there was a conspiracy or cover-up involved in Kennedy's assassination, and conspiracy theories continue to thrive to this day. Franklin D. Roosevelt. On February 15, 1933, just 17 days before Franklin D. Roosevelt was set to take office, a dramatic attempt on his life unfolded in Miami, Florida. Giuseppe Zangara fired 5 shots at Roosevelt. While the president-elect was unharmed, Chicago Mayor Anton Cermak was fatally wounded, and 4 others were injured. Zangara quickly confessed to the murder of Cermak and was executed in the electric chair on March 20, 1933. But who was Zangara really aiming for? While many initially believed Roosevelt was the target, there's another intriguing theory. Could it have been a hit ordered by the infamous Al Capone? Cermak had been a thorn in the side of the Chicago outfit, cracking down on organized crime. This raises the question, was Cermak the intended victim all along? The true motive behind the attack remains a mystery, adding a layer of intrigue to an already shocking event in American history. Theodore Roosevelt. 3.5 years after leaving office, Theodore Roosevelt jumped back into the political ring, running for president in the 1912 election as the Progressive Party candidate. On October 14th, while campaigning in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, an unexpected turn of events unfolded. John Schrank, a saloon keeper from New York who had been shadowing Roosevelt for weeks, fired a shot that struck Roosevelt in the chest with a .38 caliber Colt Police Positive Special. The bullet's impact was dramatically softened by a 50-page speech titled "Progressive Cause Greater Than Any Individual," which was folded twice in Roosevelt's breast pocket along with a metal glasses case. This unlikely armor likely saved his life. Schrank was quickly disarmed and captured by the crowd, who might have lynched him if Roosevelt hadn't intervened, insisting they spare his assailant. Roosevelt, a seasoned hunter with a good understanding of anatomy, determined that since he wasn't coughing blood, the bullet hadn't punctured his lung. Ignoring pleas to seek immediate medical attention, he pressed on, delivering his scheduled speech with blood slowly staining his shirt. For a staggering 84 minutes, he spoke, famously beginning with, "Ladies and gentlemen, I don't know whether you fully understand that I have just been shot, but it takes more than that to kill a bull moose." Later, medical examinations revealed that the bullet had lodged in his chest muscle, avoiding the pulmonary pleurae. Doctors decided it was safer to leave the bullet where it was rather than attempt to remove it. Roosevelt carried that bullet in his body for the rest of his life. William McKinley. On a late summer afternoon at precisely 4:07 p.m. on September 6, 1901, President William McKinley was mingling with the crowd at the Temple of Music in Buffalo, New York. It was a day like any other at the Pan American Exposition until it wasn't. Leon Czolgosz, an anarchist with a .32 caliber revolver hidden under a handkerchief, seized his moment. He fired 2 shots at close range. The first bullet ricocheted off McKinley's jacket, lodging in his sleeve. The second shot found its mark, piercing the president's stomach. At first, it seemed McKinley might defy the odds and recover. However, his condition took a grave turn as gangrene set in around his wounds. The nation's hope dwindled, and on September 14, 1901, at 2:15 a.m., McKinley passed away. In the chaotic moments following the shooting, the crowd reacted swiftly. Led by James Benjamin Parker, they subdued Czolgosz. The 4th Brigade, National Guard Signal Corps, and police quickly intervened, and Czolgosz was beaten so severely that his survival for trial was uncertain. Nonetheless, he stood trial on September 24th. It lasted just 2 days, with Czolgosz refusing to defend himself. He was convicted and sentenced to death, meeting his end in the electric chair at Auburn Prison on October 29, 1901. Czolgosz's motivations were politically charged, but what he hoped to achieve remains a mystery. His act of violence, however, had a lasting impact. In response to McKinley's assassination, Congress tasked the Secret Service with the responsibility of protecting the president, a duty that continues to this day. James A. Garfield. It was a bright Saturday morning on July 2, 1881. At the bustling Baltimore and Potomac Railroad Station in Washington, D.C., President James A. Garfield, just 4 months into his term, was about to embark on a journey when tragedy struck. At 9:20 a.m., writer and lawyer Charles J. Guiteau approached Garfield and fired 2 shots from a .442 Webley British Bulldog revolver. One bullet grazed Garfield's shoulder, while the other lodged in his back. For the next 11 agonizing weeks, Garfield battled the effects of his injuries. The bullet wounds were compounded by severe infections, a result of doctors repeatedly probing his body with unsterilized instruments and fingers. Despite the best efforts of his medical team, the president succumbed to these infections on September 19, 1881, at 10:35 p.m., 79 days after the attack. Guiteau was quickly apprehended at the scene. His trial, which captivated the nation, began on November 14, 1881, and concluded on January 25, 1882. He was found guilty and sentenced to death. An appeal failed, and Guiteau was hanged on June 30, 1882, just 2 days before the first anniversary of the shooting. Throughout his trial and even during his autopsy, Guiteau was deemed mentally unstable, possibly suffering from neurosyphilis. His motive? He believed he deserved a government position, specifically ambassador to France, based on a speech he claimed helped Garfield win the presidency. Abraham Lincoln. It was Good Friday, April 14, 1865, and the stage was set for a tragic moment in American history. At around 10:15 p.m., President Abraham Lincoln was enjoying the play Our American Cousin at Ford's Theater in Washington. D.C. little did he know, a sinister plan was unfolding. John Wilkes Booth, a well-known actor and fervent Confederate sympathizer, was about to change the course of history. Booth, who had never joined the Confederate Army but had connections with the Confederate Secret Service, originally plotted to kidnap Lincoln. However, after hearing Lincoln's speech on April 11th advocating voting rights for Black Americans, Booth decided to take a more drastic step. Learning that Lincoln would be at Ford's Theater, Booth, along with his co-conspirators, devised a plan not just to kill the president, but also to target Vice President Andrew Johnson and Secretary of State William H. Seward. As Lincoln sat in the balcony with his wife Mary and their guests, Major Henry Rathbone and Clara Harris, Booth made his move. He slipped into the president's box, aimed a .44 caliber Derringer pistol at Lincoln's head, and fired. The shot was fatal. Rathbone tried to stop Booth, but was stabbed in the process, allowing Booth to escape. The stricken president was quickly attended to by doctors and moved across the street to the Peterson House. There, after 9 hours in a coma, Lincoln passed away at 7:22 a.m. on April 15th. Witnesses noted that his final breaths were calm and peaceful, a stark contrast to the turmoil of his presidency. According to some accounts, he even smiled just before he died. Historian Lee Davis remarked that it was the first time in 4 years, probably, that a peaceful expression crossed his face. John Hay, Lincoln's secretary, observed a look of unspeakable peace on his features. The broader assassination plot crumbled. Seward was severely injured but survived, and Johnson's attacker lost his nerve. Booth managed to evade capture for 12 days, but was eventually tracked down by Union soldiers to a farm in Virginia, 70 miles south of Washington. Refusing to surrender, Booth was shot and killed by Union cavalryman Boston Corbett. 4 of his co-conspirators were later hanged for their roles in the conspiracy. Andrew Jackson. Just outside the Capitol building, President Andrew Jackson faced an assassination attempt from an unlikely adversary, Richard Lawrence, a house painter. Armed with 2 pistols, Lawrence aimed and fired at Jackson, but in a twist of fate, both weapons misfired. Astonishingly, when tested later, the pistols worked perfectly. Fueled by a combination of anger and survival instinct, Jackson used his cane to beat Lawrence before the would-be assassin was apprehended. Lawrence was later found not guilty by reason of insanity and spent the rest of his life in a mental institution until his death in 1861. George W. Bush. The only attempt included here that did not involve a firearm and took place outside the United States occurred in Tbilisi, Georgia, in 2005. While delivering a speech, President George W. Bush encountered a unique assassination attempt. A grenade was thrown onto the stage, its pin removed. However, the handkerchief used to conceal it was wrapped so tightly that the lever couldn't detach, preventing the explosion. Although no one was injured in this dramatic incident, the story took a darker turn 2 months later. The culprit killed an agent during his arrest. He was subsequently convicted and sentenced to life in prison. That's all for today. Share your thoughts in the comments below. Thanks for staying until the end, and I'll catch you next time.